So when I got into the business of undercover with the FBI, I needed a name. You know that, Jerry. You need an alias. Only one name kept popping up. It was Donnie Brasco. And why? Because he made such an impression on me as a young guy and as I got older. So I went and I asked him, I said, Donnie, I need an alias. Do you mind if I use your name? And he said, of course not. No. He said, not a problem. But little did we know where it would go. After it did explode, I was kind of, oh my God, what did I do here? But I talked to Donnie after, and he said, don't worry about it. He said, I gave you my approval, so, we'll just deal with it.
Welcome to episode 367 of FBI Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent on a mission to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues. Today, we get to speak to retired agent Donnie Brasco, who served in the FBI for 21 years. In part one of this two-part episode, Donnie reviews his career navigating as an agent with his infamous name and following in the footsteps of his uncle, legendary undercover agent Joe Pistone, who infiltrated the mafia using the alias Donnie Brasco. Joe Pistone joins us at the end of the episode to share why he used a family name as his alias. Donnie also reviews the importance of developing confidential sources, why he became a certified undercover agent, and his undercover role in Operation Black Eagle. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there's a link to the show notes at jerrywilliams.com. There's also a link where you can join my reader team about crime fiction and the FBI in books, TV, and movies, and learn more about me and my books. Thank you for your support. Now here's the show. I want to welcome my guest, retired agent Donnie Brasco. Hey, Donnie.
Hey, Jerry, how are you?
I'm great. I feel like there should be balloons and cakes and everything because I feel like this is your coming out party. Today, we're going to talk about one of the worst kept secrets in the FBI.
Yes, and let's make sure we clarify it's a different kind of coming out party. Although that'd be okay too.
True. All right. So what is the secret that we are revealing?
Well, the secret we're going to reveal is that when I was about 16 years old, my family were invited to a party. You get in the car, you go, it might have been 15, but I think it was 16. I had no driver's license, so we packed up the car and drove a couple hours away from home. We lived outside of the Philadelphia general area, and we drove somewhere near New York. We pull up, go to the house. We knew it was a relative thing. I didn't know if it was a birthday party or whatever. We open the door, we're greeted, and there are posters and books and people with hats on with my name on it. My dad had known a little bit about what was going on, and I call him Uncle Joe. He's actually my cousin for respect. People would say, hey, your uncle. So I went with it, but he used my name as his alias when he went undercover against the mafia in New York.
And you knew nothing about it until this was a book launch party.
It was a book launch party, and literally everywhere you went, there were posters and books like this in various places all over the house. As soon as you came in, there was a foyer. The house was a big sprawling rancher. So everywhere you went, it was like I was in shock and awe.
And what did they tell you?
Honestly, I don't know what anybody told me. We were just walking around. It wasn't a dream. It was surreal then, and it's surreal today.
All right. So somebody had to explain what happened. I'm sure at some point you read the book, but that night, what did you find out? How long had he been using your name?
Joe came into the Bureau right around 1970 and started doing some undercover work in the New York and whatever offices that needed someone, and he had to use a name that was familiar. Back then, there was zero FBI undercover school. Basic training was, if you were a guy that could handle themselves, whether it was you're a bookkeeper or you were, a guy that could run heavy equipment, Joe could ride a truck, a 18-wheeler. So you'd have to have a name that if somebody yelled at you in a bar or in a crowded room, you'd turn around. And Joe just took, my dad was Dominic Donald, and I was always Donnie as a kid, and Joe knew dad as Donald. So whatever way it was, he liked the name, and he was on your show 10 years ago, and he said, I don't know where I got it. It just had a nice ring. Apparently, it worked, and he used it when he started doing some bit undercovers. When the big case in New York came about, he already had the name. Truthfully, my dad always made it sound like he asked him, if you investigate a little bit more, you look into it. I'm not sure if Joe said, hey, I'm using your name. I'm using Donnie's name, whatever. And my dad, they loved each other. They were close as little boys. And there was nothing my dad wouldn't do for Joe.
And
it wasn't a big issue. To him, it wasn't.
By the time Joe told him that he was using Donnie Brasco as his undercover alias, he already had his driver's license and other identification with that name on it.
Yeah, I was young. This was unheard of. There was never an undercover agent like him, and there will never be another one like him. I didn't even have a driver's license at that point. But my dad
how old were you when your father and mother learned that Joe was using your name?
I was probably around 8 or 9 years old. My mother was scared to death. Joe's mom, Aunt Rosie, called my mom and said, pray for Joe, he's in trouble. They didn't know what he was doing. Joe never said a word about what case he was working. It wasn't supposed to be what it was. And it turned out to be 6 years.
What did they know at that point? So what I'm talking about when he first came to them and let him know that he was using the name. What did they know?
Nothing.
Just that he was going undercover and he was using that name.
Correct. That was it. Zero.
All right. And are you telling me that they didn't know anything else until the book came out?
Absolutely. Now, my dad is deceased, and that's between dad and Joe. My dad was a minister, so he could keep a secret, and Joe can keep a secret too. We could read between the lines, but if he told dad it's in the grave, I don't believe so, but those guys were close. So
okay, so once the book comes out and it is an instant bestseller,
right?
How soon do you start hearing and receiving the ramifications of the fact that there's a hit book, a best-selling book out named Donnie Brasco, and your name is Donnie Brasco? Do you start immediately hearing people say funny jokes?
Instantly from that day until today, when I use my name, if I have to use my name, dinner reservation, credit card, Amazon, whatever, you name it, you need your credit card and your name. People usually look up, laugh a little bit. Until today, Jerry, I would never say a word. I'd say, yeah, it's funny, famous name, poo-poo it off. I mean, that's what we were taught to do. I can tell you this, Joe never came out, the FBI never came out to my parents' house, to my aunts and uncles, anyone that bore our family name and gave us some kind of tutorial. It was zero. It was uncharted territory.
Which is really strange because for his family, talk about what they did when the book came out and now Joe Pistone and Donnie Brasco are household names. What did his immediate family?
They were immediately put into protective custody. I want to say they were moved at least 4 times, maybe more. They were nowhere in the area. They had new names, new everything. Everything, they created new identities, the whole 9 yards.
And this, I want to correct myself because this didn't happen when the book came out. This happened when all of the bad guys were arrested and it went to trial, because that's at the point where the names became public knowledge.
Correct. Because back then, I don't know any agents that, now we can go in Cameo, where you can talk to the judge behind, or they'll pull a screen up for your safety. And it's really extreme circumstances when they let you do that, because if your accuser needs to be able to address what happened, then, you're actually the guy reporting. So they want to see your face.
This is really fascinating because once it became public knowledge and the indictments and the trials were underway, the Pistones were put into protective
Correct.
custody. But
Correct.
all of Joe's relatives, whose last name was Pistone, what happened to them?
Well, I can tell you this. Some were children of immigrants. They were proud of their heritage. They worked in the plastics business. They worked in construction. One worked for the post office. So these were people that were proud about what their families did coming to America. And now they, as children, were successful. In that era, you would put your name on your mailbox. The mailman knew who you were, and it was a sense of pride. Every one of them took their names off their mailboxes. There was no animosity from our side because Joe was always, I looked up to him as a little boy. He and my dad were like glue. So there was nothing he could do wrong. I don't think we really understood the ramifications, even the rest of the family, because they were hundreds of miles away from New York City. Back then, there were no computers. So somebody would have to seek you out. And I do know that the Bureau went to the guys that Joe was involved with and said, hey, he's one of ours and, hands off, which, in the old days, they wouldn't go after your family, but today's a different ballgame.
For his cousins and aunts and uncles that had the last name Pistone, where did they live? As far as, were they in?
There were some that were in New Jersey, some in far-reaching areas of Pennsylvania, but most of them were generally in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey area at that point. Now we're strewn all over the earth, but at that point, everyone was in the general area where he and his immediate family, he and the girls.
And you said you were cousins. I want to just make sure people understand that your father's mother was Joe's father's sister.
Yeah, my grandmother and Joe's father were brother and sister.
All right, and I guess the risk to the Brasco family wasn't as severe because nobody knew that name was really associated with the family as far as the public and the bad guys, the mob guys.
Correct. He took it out of a book. That's where he says he got the name.
Yeah. So for you, it was not necessarily a danger situation, but just a real inconvenience.
I don't, back in that day, it was a blow to the families in New York. And I don't know that they wouldn't have, if they could have found out that it wasn't a fake name and it was real people, maybe they would have tried to do something. Who knows? But we kept it between the Bureau and the family. That was it.
The secret that we're
Correct.
talking about, that's
Correct.
the purpose of the secret. Because if it came out that, oh, that's not just some name he pulled out of a book, it actually is another family name, then you would have been subject to the same potential dangers that the Pistones.
Right. As of a conversation a week ago with Joe, I can understand that there could be backlash towards him, towards the FBI. How could they do this? You took a family name. I don't know that they knew it or not. I don't know that in that era that he would even tell them. They had no idea we existed. We didn't have computers. So unless somebody knew, oh, he's got relatives that are Brascos, the issue comes up. Joe, we've got to sort of think about this. I don't want anybody looking at you thinking, how did you do this to your family? Because his answer to me was this. I said, people are going to ask that. Do you have an answer? And he goes, well, what do you think? I said, well, what I think is you thought the family could handle it. And he said, you're right.
Okay.
And that was it. I mean, a week ago, we had the conversation. I said, because you've got to think about it. We're in a day and age where people are a little bit touchy-feely and scared about, whatever. And this is sort of a big thing, He trusted us. It wasn't like he didn't come out and there was, hey, making sure you didn't tell anyone. I mean, there was never anything. He knew that the bloodline runs deep and that we had the same respect for him, the government, and the secrecy and sanctity of the case.
Yeah, but I would imagine that, of course, there was no undercover unit when
Correct.
he was going through the program, when he was undercover. But I would imagine that FBI headquarters, the case agents and the supervisors of the case would have definitely discouraged him from using a family member's name as his undercover name.
You know what, Jerry? Besides my coming out, we're opening a whole, these guys are now, a lot of them are octogenarians. Memories might be a little different now than they were before, but yeah, I mean, it was the wild, wild west back then, and he was the first guy on the horse,
But then you make it even more complicated, don't you, Donnie?
Just a little bit. I mean, if your relative is a race car driver and you like cars, what are you going to gravitate towards? He's the Formula One champion of the FBI. I had no idea. When the book was written, to be honest with you, sorry, Joe, I don't think I ever read the book. But, I could talk.
How old were you when the book came out?
I was 16, I think. 16, I believe. All I knew, as a kid, my dad would say, hey, Joe's coming. He's a G-man. Carries a badge and a gun. And a little boy from that era, cops and robbers was it. To be an FBI agent was something that was just, to me, he's rock star. Was then and still is now.
And so from that point on, you wanted to follow in his footsteps?
That's the only thing I ever wanted to do. The problem was hiring freezes and money, so there's not always openings with the Bureau. The competition is incredible.
All right, so the book came out in what year?
81.
And the movie came out in
97. I was just at the point where I reached the end of my limit. I had my own business, and I was in business for 7 or 8 years at that point. The tug of war was, hey, man, you're getting older. What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
I'm not going to do the math in my head. Just tell us. At 1997, how old were you?
I'm 33, just turned 33, 32, 33.
Okay. And you own your own business. It's a restaurant bagel shop in
Correct.
where?
It was in Glassboro, New Jersey,
Oh,
little college town. Now it's Rowan University.
And we should say, because we haven't mentioned this, that we know each other from the Philadelphia division. We also ended up living in the same town, and our daughters went to high school together in the same grade. And so we have a connection.
It's true.
Yeah, we have some history. So, yeah, I would have been living there in 97. Maybe I came to your bagel shop one day. I don't know.
You may have. We were the only game in town at that point.
All right, so you're running this very successful business. I say it's very successful because I understand that it's still operating today. You sold it.
I sold it to a guy that worked for me, an incredibly trusted guy, and he and his family took it over, and they've had it since. It's been since 89, I think, that I started it. 89 or 90, so that's
What's the name
quite a
of
long
it?
time.
Let's give them some business.
It's called Rise Bagels now.
All right, so I want to get all the timeline in because now you still have this desire to be an FBI agent, and the name Donnie Brasco now explodes. It was well known and in the public domain when the best-selling book came out, but now you're talking about a major feature film starring Johnny Depp and Al Pacino.
Yes.
Wow. You can't get away from those comments now.
No, absolutely not. And the gravity of it hit us when we went out. All the family were invited to go out for the premiere to California. We went to the premiere, and whether you read the book or not, I mean, I understood it, and I talked to my dad, and I'm sure I read portions of it and talked to Joe, but seeing what was done, even dramatized as much as it was or could have been, was just amazing, especially because every other word is Donnie this, Donnie that. Hey, Donnie, you couldn't get enough of it. I couldn't run from it.
All right. Well, tell us about the premiere because that had to be surreal.
Well, I'll tell you what, the premiere was surreal. There were movie stars. My favorite, and he's still one of my favorite actors, Vince Vaughn was there. He had not been really discovered just prior to the movie Swingers. He and I had a really great conversation going up an escalator, and he didn't know who I was. He was telling me, hey, how are you? And, meeting. He's in jeans and a t-shirt. I'm in a shirt and tie because this is big time. Robin Williams was there. Rosie Perez was there. Let's see. I mean, of course, Al Pacino. At that time, Tony Robbins was big. He was a self-help guy, guru. Back then, he was monster. But Johnny Depp and Al Pacino, I mean, there's...
Yeah.
At that
of
point
course,
now.
You have that poster behind you, and I have to tell everyone that it's not normally there. I asked you to put it up there.
That's usually in the corner of my bedroom. Right.
Yeah.
But that poster actually came off the wall at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood. That's where the premiere was. Mann's Chinese Theater. Yeah, so that was one of the posters. I rolled it up and took it on the plane. It's lasted all these years.
Wow. And I know that, and Joe doesn't talk a lot about this, but he actually became really good friends with Johnny Depp.
Oh yeah, super, super guy. In fact, I had conversations with Johnny in passing, and he told me, he says, "Hey, I'm a high school dropout. I'm just riding the wave." And that really says it. The course of his life was he's just riding a wave. And he's had some rough times here and there, but he's a good guy and he's been a good friend of the family.
Yeah, and I know that you have some photos of you with Al Pacino and photos of you with Johnny Depp. So we're gonna, flash those up also so people can see.
Sure, sure. Do you want me to do that now?
Yeah, show me.
Glad I have pants on. So here's
Ah,
me and Al
oh, that's
Pacino.
so cool.
Yeah.
Look at you.
Yeah, I don't have the picture with Johnny here with me. I apologize. This is me at 16 with my dad and Joe.
Ah, that's nice.
Can you see it good?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice.
It was an incredible experience. The pride of what he did for our country was through the roof after that movie. It just fed my desire even more.
We'll be back after this short message. Tell us the funny story about when you applied for the FBI. What happened when they contacted you because they didn't even believe that the name was real.
Right. So I didn't tell Joe that I applied.
Why?
So,
Why not?
you know what? Honestly, I had actually applied 2 years before, or 3 years before, to the New Jersey State Police. And Joe had connections with all law enforcement. So I actually did apply and was accepted into the New Jersey State Police. At the same time, the Bureau opened up hiring. The last class that went through were already employees that were on board. And you remember when they used to do that, they would have people that wanted to be agents, and they had the class before, so I couldn't get in that class. So I had applied to the state police, and I just didn't stick with it because the Bureau was always, that's where I wanted to be.
He knew you were interested, but he didn't know when you applied once the position opened up, they were hiring again.
To be an FBI agent at that point was just something that was just, it was not, I don't even know if it was a dream. Was it even doable? You're competing against much younger people. I was 33 years old at that time. And so I just always trained. I kept in shape. And one day I decided to go to the William Green Federal Building and apply. Back then, it was paper. You just fill out this short form. I filled it out, turned it back in, and I just totally forgot about it. One of the girls at the business answered the phone one day, and she said, "Hey, somebody's on the phone from the FBI." And I told them, "Quit joking. I thought it was one of your stupid friends." And she hangs up. And this happens like 3 times. And finally, the guy from the applicant unit, and you and I both know him very well, Mike O'Brien, he says, "If there is a Donnie Brasco, please tell him to call me. Here's my number." She comes back, gives me this little piece of paper, says, "The FBI called for you. It's probably one of your jerk friends, but here's the number." I call back. He goes through the whole story. He says, "We get guys all the time. We joke, and they would just mess with each other about people that were applicants." And it was just common. So when he saw my name, he's like, "This has got to be a joke." And he actually did find a way to get a hold of Joe to verify that I was for real.
He's calling Joe to verify whether you're for real or not, and you haven't told him that you applied?
No, so that's where, I don't know if it wasn't funny at that point. Now it's funny when we talk about it, but Joe calls me and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm working." "What are you doing?" We go through this dog and pony show. It could have been a comedy skit. And finally he throws F-bombs at me like left and right. He's like, "What the F are you doing? You applied to the Bureau." I'm like, "Yes, I did." And he says, "You didn't tell me." And I was like, "Well, I didn't know I needed to tell you. I get your approval." It said, "Do you have any relatives that work for the FBI?" I put you down. I have no idea, what the process is. So he goes through this whole thing and he's like, "They called me on the phone. They thought you were a joke, blah, blah, blah. But I squared them away and I told them you were for real." And honestly, we didn't speak about getting in the Bureau at that point because the process. You've got the long form application, then they do your background, then you have to do the polygraph, which was a whole nother fiasco because I've never had a polygraph before, and They go through this whole thing about your past. And of course, the guy says, this is one of the longest polygraphs. He goes, you got to be a Catholic or a Christian, somebody that believes in doing the right thing, because I spilled my guts to this poor guy. It was true when he'd say, hey, focus, because I just couldn't believe this was happening. Once I got the call that I got in, to be honest with you, I don't remember if Joe called me or I called him to say, hey, I got the nod. Whether I told him that day or not, the day before I'm going into the academy, I called him on the phone. I'll never forget this. I was cleaning my fireplace out. And I said, hey, I got the nod. They called me. They got me into a class. Any advice? And in Joe fashion, he says, don't F it up. The phone goes silent. I'm like, okay, thanks. I'll try not to do that. And that was it until I got in the academy, and there was an issue at the academy that I had to make a phone call to him about.
Oh, I
that.
love this story. You know what? Let me stop for a minute, because I forgot to tell everybody the whole purpose of this coming out, the whole purpose of revealing this secret. I'm sure many people have told you throughout your career and once you retired that you need to write a book, that you need to share your story. And right. So what's the purpose of this exclusive interview that you're doing with me?
Other than you finding out that I'm retired now, I'm looking for an agent, a publicist. I'm looking for somebody that I can, spill my guts to about all the happenings, what it was like being a kid, finds out, that your name's being used in this monster undercover operation and all the rest of the years. I sort of feel like I'm a rat right now because I'm coming out with it, but there's a great story of the love of country. I know, but it's the love of country. It's the love of what Joe did. It's the love of the FBI. I'm just incredibly proud about what he was and that I followed in his footsteps. I've written pretty much enough for an entire book. I just need to have someone in the business see if it's worth it.
Well, I think it's a fascinating story. When I interviewed Joe, I think it was episode 46 back in 2016. I'll play that clip.
There's a lot that goes into the making of an undercover agent and an undercover case that you don't see in the movies or you don't see on television.
Can we talk about your choice of name, Donnie Brasco? Because I know the story behind that.
I'd rather just say that it's a name that rang a good bell for me, and I like the sound of it.
All right. Well, I know the true story. Would you rather me not?
Yes, I would. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
Okay. Sorry, listeners. I wish I could tell you the story because it is so wild. But Joe says I can't, so I won't. And so I kept the secret. I kept that secret, the worst kept secret in the FBI. Many people knew that you were related to Joe, but out of respect, we didn't talk about it. We didn't say anything to anybody. And now here you are talking about it because it's your right to do so. It's your name. But tell us about Joe. Does he know what you're doing?
Actually, when I started writing this book, getting all of my vignettes and memoirs together, I had to sit down with his wife, and my two cousins, his daughters, and I said, look, I just want to let you know, I want to get your blessing. I'd like to write my side of the story, because I followed in your footsteps and nobody knows that I exist. And there have been not even parallels. There have been times, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but I don't want to give everything up because it's in my memoirs, that I was working undercover when his name's mentioned. Yeah. To me, while I'm working undercover against someone, talking about rats and talking about snitches, and here I am, Donnie Brasco, it's surreal. The whole thing's surreal.
Usually on FBI case file review, we talk about a case first, and then I ask the question of when and why you joined the FBI. We're kind of flipping that this time, but we are going to talk about the undercover roles that you played when you were an FBI agent, because it's still amazing that not only did you become an FBI agent, but you decided to become an undercover agent and go through the certification undercover program.
At that point, I didn't think it was possible as well, because I actually asked the unit, could I go through with another name? and they wouldn't let me do it. So, of course, while I'm there for that period of time, I was put through, I don't want to say literal hell, but there was nothing they were going to do to kick me out. If they told me to jump, I jumped higher. If they told me to lay down, I laid down. But there was a point where they're not going to let somebody's namesake just slide through, because the Bureau has never had a certified undercover agent die in the line of duty. And that's a really protected thing. So these guys, if you don't make the grade, they're not passing you through.
No matter what your name is or who you're related to.
Obviously, no matter what your name is. Because I don't want to give too many things away, but I mean, there was like we would call it the Grim Reaper, and you'd either get tapped on the shoulder during class, and that person, you never saw them again. Or the middle of the night, you get a phone call, and the next day you don't see them in class.
They failed the program.
Correct. There's a whole process where, you have people that are proctoring the classes or the lessons and all the scenarios they put you through. And then there's a meeting. Hey, did they make it? Didn't they make it? What can we do? For me, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I was put through weekend scenarios to try, and I don't want to say break me, but really to try and break me. I don't want to say I'm a humble guy, because everyone's got a little bit of pride, but they wanted to break me. There's no doubt about it. They wanted to break me, and I was Joe Pistone's relative, and they weren't going to give it to me, and I wasn't going to let them take it away from me.
All right, you earned it.
Well, I think everyone earns it, but I was put through, like I said, I don't want to give anything away. When my book, God willing, comes out and somebody picks it up, just my going through the FBI Academy was tough enough. And we forgot that story, Jerry.
Oh, no, we didn't forget it. I was going to circle back.
I've been perplexed. There are people that absolutely love Joe in the FBI. And then there's people that are the other side, and I had to navigate for 21 years between that. My name was either good or bad with some people, because they thought, oh, he's out there shucking books and doing this and that. And, 99% of these guys couldn't tie his shoes.
So let's go back. We skipped ahead, but let's go back to the FBI Academy. And one of the first things that happened to you based on your name and people not knowing that you're related to Joe.
Right. Because it goes back to the best kept secret. This instructor had no idea who I was. There's probably 4 levels of seating in this room. 50 plus or minus seats. My name's B, so I'm in the front. You have a nameplate in the front. It's Donnie Brasco. So my name's in the front. This guy gives his spiel to the class. I don't even remember what it was. And he fixates on my name. And he looks at me, looks at the class, and says, oh, he goes, I know the real Donnie Brasco. He's a real asshole, full of himself. He goes through this whole epitaph about Joe. And the whole class, most of the people around me knew, because it percolated. We were there for probably a week. And so at this point, the class goes silent. He looks at everybody like, what, what's going on? Why is everyone looking straight at me? I look at him and I say, you know what? I said, that's great. I said, when we're done class, I'll make sure I go make a phone call and tell him that you give him your regards. And now everybody looks around like, oh, dear God, what's going to happen next? See, he got real quiet. Thank God I don't remember his name. But after class, I went back to one of the cubicles. I called Joe, and I knew his name at that point. And Joe began to give me the business about, you tell him I'm going to come there. I'm going to kick his ass. He's a pile of crap. Every name in the book. And he says, you make sure you tell him. I'm like, Joe, I can't tell him that. I just got here. I'm not going to get kicked out for that. And he was ticked. But It was the paintbrush that started. That's the first week of the FBI Academy. There's a negative, boom. And, so you take your licks.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, what a way to start.
Tell me about it.
What a way to start. All right, we're going to go through this quick, but after you graduate from the FBI Academy, your first assignment is to the Washington field office in Washington, D.C.
Yes. I was on a national security squad. It was all the countries that didn't mean anything to the general public at that time, and then 9/11 hits, and those were all the hot spots in the world.
So you came in 2000?
2001.
Okay. And so you came in and then you graduated by 2001.
Correct.
And then
Correct.
later on in September, boom.
September, boom. And then we're out doing leads all over DC. We're running around like crazy 24/7 interviewing people, persons of interest. It was a way to get, indoctrinated into doing FD 302s, et cetera. And then right after that, in October, anthrax hit. I was actually in Philadelphia when 9/11 hit. So I was there. My ex-wife at the time I was there on a hardship. So I was assigned to WFO, and I was commuting back and forth to WFO. I'd leave at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, get there, and they put me on a wire shift so I could work straight hours. I was assigned to WFO, but I was still living in the Philadelphia area until I just couldn't do it anymore. And then I stayed with a buddy of mine. Mike was incredibly gracious, and I slept on his couch for probably a month or two because I was driving 300 miles a day. And then anthrax hit. And then an email went out, absolutely stupendous special agent in charge put an email out that said, hey, we're looking for someone, 1 or 2 people to go to the Newark division to work anthrax. Well, my family's still in New Jersey. My supervisor at the time said, hey, go down and ask him. You want to go? You can go. I went down there, and Art Eberhardt, great guy, says, hey, you go downstairs and you tell my supervisor, John Hosinski, super guy as well, you need a car and you're out of here. No paper, and you know how the Bureau was. Yeah. No paper, nothing. I just left. And I was there for going on 2 years in the Newark division, still assigned to Washington field office.
How did you officially get to Philadelphia?
I officially got to Philadelphia because my ex-wife had some serious health issues, and she had developed doctors that she felt comfortable with. It was a long process, but I got reassigned back to Philadelphia.
And that's that hardship transfer that you talked about.
Right, correct.
Okay. Because I always wondered how you got from WFO, which is the Washington field office, to Philadelphia, because those are 2 top offices. You don't transfer that way from one office to another. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move forward and start talking about what you did when you got to Philadelphia, because you had the opportunity to work with some of my favorite people.
I was assigned to FBI Squad 2, which was the non-traditional gang squad. You had the organized crime squad on one side of us. On the other side, we had the Latin Americans. And then we pretty much worked biker gangs, black drug gangs. We worked the other side.
Okay. And you had people on that squad that have been on this podcast. Judy's been on the podcast 3 or 4 times.
You're kidding. I was so lucky.
Supervisor Sweeney's been on the podcast.
Everything outside of Joe, I learned how to be an agent from that squad. Period. Good, bad, or indifferent. Our squad was the squad to be on, and it was tough to stay on. Jim would dangle every once in a while because after terrorism, they're looking for bodies. You had to go out, do your job, get the work done, and you had to prove yourself. It had nothing to do with my name, but it didn't matter who you were. You had to produce. And we produced.
We'll be back after this short message. Yeah, this is for all agents, but one of the most important things for being on Squad 2, transnational gangs and domestic gangs, was developing human sources, developing informants. It was like the number one. And it really relates to what you did as an undercover, because it's necessary to have an informant or a source introduce you in an undercover role. So why don't we talk about the work you did and learning how to develop those human sources, those confidential sources?
Okay. So generally, you get a source by someone getting jammed up. They get locked up. They don't want to go to jail forever or whatever time period it is, and they decide to cooperate with us. And that's usually the norm. And I think those were 270s, right, Jerry?
Yes.
And then we have the 137. These aren't going to testify. They're going to give you passive information, listening post, whatever. We want people to testify, but sources generally are not the cleanest individuals. And by clean, I mean that they're criminals. How's someone going to trust their information because they know that they're just trying to work off their time? That's a difficult thing to navigate because you have to really put your trust in the information they give you, because you then pass it off to who's ever going to work that case, or it might be your own case. In my opinion, they are second best only to an undercover or to a Title III wiretap or something like that, because these folks are involved. They're putting their life on the line every day of the week. And I was fortunate enough, I guess it's fortunate, it was unfortunate for them, but during my tenure on Squad 2, I had some of the most violent criminals that you could possibly imagine in every genre. And somehow, with my personality, my training from the squad, from the other folks that had people like this, you develop relationships with these people. And when you develop relationships, they're relationships that all get broken ultimately, because either the case gets to fruition, maybe they've got to get put away for a little bit of time, whatever. But I maintain relationships with a lot of people that were probably against Bureau guidelines, but I considered them, they're putting their life on the line. I never did anything like that, but I pushed the limits a lot, and I learned all that from Sweeney and Jesse and Judy and Mario and all those guys, that sometimes you have to push the limit a little bit, because these guys and women, their life is literally on the line. There's people that are going to come and save me. They find out that someone's a rat or a snitch or a cooperator, it's not going to go so good for them. So I was always very compassionate towards sources. And it taught me how to be an undercover. I mean, I worked, primarily I got sucked into working outlaw motorcycle gangs. I rode dirt bikes as a kid. I was by no means, no visible tattoos, but I was scared when I got the call that Greg Auld was retiring. And as I recall, Greg might remember different, but I'm sitting in Sweeney's office and Greg Auld hands a brown grocery bag with, there might have been one gun, maybe two, but a bunch of knives. I mean, you name it. He goes, here you go, kid. It's all yours. And he retired. Put his papers in. I don't know if it was that day, that week. Maybe I'm over dramatizing it, but that's how I saw it. Like, holy crap. And Sweeney looked at me. He goes, I guess what? And there was another buddy of mine, Billy Shute, was about a year or so.
Billy's been on the podcast too.
Great. Bill and I worked together, and we worked the streets. Bill's as white could be. He wasn't a gangster by any stretch. Incredibly well-spoken, smart guy. And here we are working like these dudes are rough. I remember he said the filing cabinet's over there. We opened the filing cabinet, and ZZ Top was handsome compared to these guys. A lot of these guys were the worst of the worst.
So you inherited from Greg Auld.
Correct.
All of these biker cases.
Right. And actually, Greg and I think Luke Church, you remember Luke? Mm-hmm. Luke, everyone sort of had their niche, but there was always like that, you were working it, but there really wasn't anything going on. Well, of course, when Billy left, and then I was sort of like left with it. I forget what squad he went to.
Went to Squad 10, to the Violent Crime Squad.
Yeah, right. So he goes to 10 Squad, and I'm sort of like the biker guy now. And it wasn't just me. It was called the McLaughlin. There was a Mid-Atlantic Gang Law Enforcement Network, and it was the whole entire country. We had an information sharing about this underworld because things were connected all over the place. I was fortunate. Greg had a guy that he was trying to cultivate, and he says, hey, you might want to try and get a hold of this guy. This guy ended up leading me to another guy, and by the time in 5-year period, I had someone or more than one person in every outlaw motorcycle gang that was in our area of responsibility. And let me tell you something. Those 302s, 302 is our investigative piece of paper that we do. Every interview is a 302. They were difficult because, as I was taught, you never know, God forbid something happens, where this piece of paper is going to go. So it was always, again, undercover, he/she. There was never anything that would directly relate back to, unless somebody really had some good information, back to that source. So we protected, and I was taught to protect them with your life. And that helped me in undercover work, because during my role as an undercover and as a case agent, we utilized sources tremendously. And, I became friends. There were people that I became friends with. They had chose a different life, but now they chose to help the FBI. They helped the FBI, they helped me, and it helped the stats for the office, for the squad. Make no mistake, there's always that there. You're not going to get funding if you're not
that
locking people up.
motivation. Yeah.
Right. So, but the source development on that squad was bar none. I mean, it. Our squad was number one. You'd run the numbers, and we'd walk around, and we could do no wrong because we had so much business. It was
Your chest, yeah.
it was. I mean, it truly was. But Sweeney always knew how to just keep us on the edge. Hey, terrorism called. They're looking for someone. We would scatter just to make sure that we were watching home base.
Making sure you were producing
Correct.
would be no
Correct.
reason for him not to want to keep you on the squad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Smart man.
Yeah.
Okay, so you obviously are a very successful case agent. Being a case agent is the most important and the best job in the bureau. I mean, in a lot of businesses and a lot of corporations, it's about moving up the ladder. I mean, I have respect for management, but management is not how the FBI gets the job done. It's the GS-10s through GS-13, the case agents, that really are who the FBI is and what the FBI does. So you're a great case agent, but now you decide that you want to help other people with their cases and become an undercover agent. How much of that related to the fact that Joe Pistone is your uncle?
I mean, of course, I find out more as I grow on the job. And again, it was one of those things where, you know what, that's what I want to do. I had the personality. I was able to talk in and out of things. People, I don't want to say they were drawn to me, but I'm just a regular guy. I'm not afraid to talk to whomever. I treat people with respect and dignity. One of the guys, Brian, who has not come on the show yet, wanted to be.
I'm still begging and begging.
We're doing a lot of plugs right now.
Yeah.
But you know how Brian is. Brian actually wanted to be undercover. And he and I, other than moving up the chain and becoming the associate deputy director, had that same feel. We weren't, quote, street guys, but we could get around. He's from the south side of Chicago. He comes back and he says, hey, I'm going to the undercover school. He goes, this is something you got to do. I'm like, Brian, I said, you know what? I don't know. Me, Donnie Brasco, going to the undercover school for the FBI. I said, man, it was tough enough for me to get through the academy, let alone day-to-day as a street agent, interviewing people, and you show your credentials, and they laugh, and they think they're fake. I mean, literally, I can't tell you how many times that happened, where people are like, come on, man, are you serious? What's your real name? Even bad guys, good people that you're interviewing didn't believe it. So I've never been able to get away from the name, and that's part of the reason of the coming out as well. It's time to tell my side of the story. So Brian decides to go to the undercover school. He passes the school and he comes back and he goes, Donnie, you got to do this, man. This is up your alley. You got to do this. And I'm like, Brian, I don't know, man. Well, of course, he badgers me enough. And I tell him, and you know how humble he is. I said, Brian, I probably would have never done it if you didn't badger me. Because truthfully, I just couldn't go through it anymore. I just wanted to be a good FBI agent, go under the radar, work my 20, 25 years and get out.
All right, well, let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Did you tell Joe that you were applying for the undercover school?
I did not. Stupidly, I did not. And of course,
why not? You knew he was going to find out.
Well, you know what? I know that he knows who's in the unit. So I knew that somebody was going to call. I didn't get the same response this time. When I knew that he knew, because you have to do paperwork. Juan Jackson, who's been on your podcast as well, Juan sort of used to run interference between Joe and I for some things. So Joe did find out that I was going in, and I did ask the undercover unit, could I go through with another name, and they declined my request. So I did actually apply and was accepted into the FBI's undercover school.
All right, and let's be clear. The reason that you wanted to go into the undercover school under a different name is because you felt that you were going to get a reaction from the instructors and the other classmates, because here comes Joe Pistone's nephew. How dare he think that he's just going to be handed, this certification, which you weren't asking for. That's why you wanted to go under a different name.
Right. Absolutely. And the truth is, of course, everyone knew there was no secret. Donnie Brasco at the undercover school, there was no secret. So, it wasn't the most difficult thing in the world. But again, I don't want to be humble. It was difficult. It was sleep deprivation. It was mind games. It was putting you through scenarios that are supposed to simulate the real world. We had some of the biggest dudes that were there to play gangsters and black mafia gangs. You have to sign a non-disclosure You're going to get touched. You might get pushed. Now it's different. But at that time, they would lay hands on you. There were some people.
Sounds like hazing.
Oh no, I again, Navy SEALs, the Rangers, and Delta, of course, cream of the crop. But that school for us was in the same light. Just because you graduate the school and just because you make it through, sometimes they can put like a moniker on and say, hey, listen, he was okay. He was good enough to pass, but we're not going to let him work criminal stuff. He's an accountant. He's an attorney. He can do some white collar things, maybe some money laundering, but he just doesn't have that edge. So to graduate and be able to do anything, any violation that the FBI has was what you wanted. Joe used to tell me with his paintbrush of words and deeds, anybody can work the other violations. Not everybody can work criminal. Criminal guys can work all the other violations, but guys that aren't criminal guys can't work our violations. It's the truth.
I would think that a good indication of whether or not you would be a good criminal undercover agent is what we were talking about before, your ability to develop human sources, to develop informants, because that shows that you have that personality to be able to, to talk to somebody to gain their confidence.
Right. The truth of the matter is that's true 100%. They teach you. And there are guys that were there when Joe was a proctor. There are guys that may have few conversations. I could call the godfather of undercover anytime I want and ask him a question. What did you do? What should I do? So one of the
this is during training or after?
Anytime. I don't know.
No, I'm asking if it was during certification.
Oh, no.
Okay, no, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew.
Post-certification. During the certification, he was one of the proctors while I was at the school. Now, not all my scenarios, but he was there. I didn't know where he was, but I know he was there 100%. I don't even know if we talked. He came afterwards to our graduation ceremony. What he said, and what all good undercovers learn, is that your number one tool is your voice, being able to talk. He used to say, if you're a tough guy, then be a tough guy. If you're not a tough guy, don't be a tough guy. If you're not a drinker, don't start drinking. If you don't talk to girls, don't, be yourself. And that's really what it comes down to. Be yourself when you're developing sources. It's sort of like the golden rule of life.
Be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not.
Because they will figure you out.
I just want to make sure that we're clear that while you were in the undercover certification school, you never spoke to Joe. Joe didn't help you out. Joe didn't tell you what to do at all. You were on your own.
Well, listen, I can tell you how on my own was, because I was one of those people or agents that got a call in the middle of the night. And I thought it was over. I mean, I leaned on my bed. I'm like, I can't believe this. What did I do? And I don't want to go into details, but obviously I made it through. But I got the call, and it wasn't for all the reasons that you might think. It was really because I was Donnie Brasco, and they were not going to give it to me. I had to make some adjustments. And nobody could do it for me. Because of that, I was put through weekend scenarios where no one else in my class, I don't remember, but I was put through they were difficult. They took me out in public and tried to humiliate me and get me to do things just to break me. They wanted to have a reason to say, this guy, he's not going to be one of us. And they don't let you in unless that happens. And, there's personality issues with every job, but this was one that no one has ever been killed as a certified FBI undercover agent. So that's going to supersede anyone's juice or having an in with anyone. And that was it.
Wow. All right. So
you got to read the book. I'll tell you all what they did to me.
I can't wait. But I do remember you saying, and we've been talking several times a day for the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. Yes.
This is off track a little bit, but what happened was, I'm very active on Instagram, and one day I see that you followed me. I immediately sent you a direct message, a DM that says, the fact that you are on Instagram tells me that you're ready to tell your story and share the secret. Call me now.
And guess what? From that moment, I called you. And let's be truthful, I'm not trying to plug or whatever. I had put an email or a direct message out the week before, just before 4th of July, to the Joe Rogan show, because another agent that you've had on the show was on it. I said, geez, you know what? I know him. I got a story to tell too. Maybe it's my time. And
Joe was on right after that.
Right. So I actually direct messaged, because I've got the blue check on Instagram and Facebook that they've checked me out. I am who I say I am. And I sent Joe Rogan a message. Joe never called back. But you know what? Jerry Williams did, and I'm on Jerry Williams' podcast. So yay for both of us. This is it. This is it.
I was so excited because, again, I had mentioned to Joe that I knew the story and had kept that secret. Actually, when I interviewed Joe, it was 2016, and you were still active.
Oh, yeah.
And so
absolutely.
when he said he didn't want me to share the story, I wasn't going to do that. So many agents, so many people in the FBI, other employees and people that you know, have always kept this quote unquote secret, the worst kept secret in the Bureau.
Yeah,
but we've all
absolutely.
kept the secret. So I am just thrilled and excited that we're talking today, and you trust me enough to be the one to help you, for the first time ever, share publicly who Donnie Brasco really is.
I think I told you before, I'm walking around thinking about, because this is my life. I feel like a rat. I feel like a snitch now because I'm giving up the secret. But I can understand, again, as an undercover agent, we get paid. Our job is to make relationships and break them. It's difficult to do. And I feel like I've gotten Joe's approval to do this. He's getting up there in age. He's in incredible shape. But this is our story, but it's my story as well. He's told his story about it. For me to follow in his footsteps, I've got to beat my chest a little bit that I followed greatness.
Yeah,
And nobody will be him,
did.
but I did my part.
Yeah. All right. This sounds like the best moment to bring Joe on, because Joe is here and he's ready to give you his seal of approval in person. Joe, I am so excited because the last time we talked, which was nearly 10 years ago, that first year I started FBI Case File Review, I brought up the fact that I knew where you got the name Donnie Brasco from. And we agreed that we weren't going to talk about it on the podcast. But today, we are revealing what I call the worst kept secret in the FBI. Because it was a secret, but a lot of people knew about it.
Mostly the guys that worked undercover with me and that I was close to, the guys and gals.
Well, I know that, before Donnie retired, it probably was, a good thing that nobody knew that the Donnie Brasco that they kind of chuckled at when he showed his creds was related to you. But I mean, there's so many agents that are coming out with wonderful books. You were the very first with the best-selling, New York Times book. But now there's so many people coming out, and Donnie wants to be able to tell his story because, boy, it's a unique one.
He doesn't know. I haven't talked to him. Oh, I talked to him, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? He doesn't know that what happened, Joe, after you and I talked, and you can say whatever you want to say about what we talked about us collaborating, or at least, hey, I give you my approval, go do what you got to do. Jerry said to me, she says, Donnie, you wrote a screenplay. That's nice. Everybody thinks they're a screenplay writer, just like you told me. She says, you need to have a book done. You need to have a manuscript.
What did I tell? That's the first thing I told you, right? Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much.
Guess what? When she said it to me, it was like a light went off, whatever. I said, okay, challenge dropped. Since the time I left you in Jersey or Florida, she said to me, you have to do this. I finished last Sunday, 270 pages. From 16, when you came to the book signing party, until I remembered everything, done. 270 pages. And you're painted on 255 of them.
Put your hands over your ears, Donnie. I'm not just saying this. It's good. There are so many agents, that would like to write a book. Donnie wrote a book, and it is good. I mean, I don't know where he got natural talent from. I mean, we all
Exactly.
need our books edited by professionals, but I've been acting as his coach. I've read almost every sentence in that book. I know he's done some recent revisions, and it's good stuff. And like he said, your story and the advice and love and tips that you gave to him over the years are threaded through and weaved through the entire manuscript. So that's why we had to have you on to talk about your relationship.
Now I'm going to get crap because I didn't listen to him.
Well, of course, Donnie Brasco, that was Donnie's father, who I grew up with, who actually, well, he was a couple years older than me. And actually, growing up, he was kind of my protector. He was one of a kind. I loved him like a brother. There were a lot of instances growing up that I can't repeat on your podcast, but he was a gentleman. And I don't know if Donnie knows, but he was a legitimately tough guy. But you would never know it because he was kind, he was soft spoken until you pushed him to a point. But other than that, you would never know that he was a legitimate tough guy.
Sounds like somebody else.
Your father was.
I know, I've heard it.
So when I got into the business of undercover with the FBI, I needed a name. You know that, Jerry. You need an alias. I was pushed around, pulled around, thought about names, and only one name kept popping up. It was Donnie Brasco. And why? Because he made such an impression on me as a young guy and as I got older. So I went and I asked him, I said, Donnie, I need an alias. Do you mind if I use your name? And he said, of course not. No. He said, not a problem. But little did we know where it would go. After it did explode, I was kind of, oh my God, what did I do here? But I talked to Donnie after, and he said, don't worry about it. He said, I gave you my approval, so, we'll just deal with it. And that's how it came about. But in all interviews, everybody asked me, where'd you get the name? And I said, well, I read it in a book, I think, or I heard it, and I just liked the way it sounded. So that's how I picked the name.
So again, not knowing the future and not knowing that there was going to be this New York Times bestselling book or a feature film, Donald Brasco, because I understand that his
Donald.
father really went
Right.
by Donald to most people, but Donnie was going by Donnie, and he had his whole life ahead of him. So, of all of the people, even though you might have been naming it after Donald Brasco, Donnie Brasco is the one that.
I took the brunt.
And that's the end of part 1 of this 2-part episode. In episode 368, we'll spend a lot more time with Joe Pistone and Donnie Brasco. In your podcast app's description of this episode, you'll find a direct link to the show notes at jerrywilliams.com, where you'll find an FBI focus bio and a photo of retired agent Donnie Brasco, as well as case-related images and links to articles about the undercover case Operation Black Eagle. There's also a link to FBI Case Review episode 46, my interview with Joe Pistone, where he talks about going undercover to infiltrate the mob. This podcast is about true crime, but if you're also interested in crime fiction, check out the link to join my reader team, which is all about the FBI and books, TV, and movies. Each month, I review shows for teachable moments about FBI policies, procedures, and programs. Can you guess what movie I'm going to review for September? That's right, Donnie Brasco, starring Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. I want to thank you for your support of the FBI and of my mission to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does. Thanks for listening. See you next week.